Hello, good afternoon. How's everyone doing? It's wonderful to see you all here today. I've got a great presentation lined up. My name's TJ. I'm the program coordinator here at the Library and Observatory. And I just always wanted to say welcome, but also a couple reminders. If you haven't had a chance yet, make sure you silence your cell phone. And I also just wanted to say how grateful we are for this really terrific partnership that we've created over the years with Learning and Retirement. This is, I think, our third of 4 programs that we have scheduled in this through November, and then we've got some more coming up as well. And so take a look at our program guide if you haven't. You can pick that up in the back of the room. And then in about a month or so, we'll have our next guide out that'll cover all of December, January, and February, where we'll have some more great programs. So it's been really great to work with Learning and Retirement. They're a terrific organization, and I highly encourage you to, hopefully through these lectures, really enjoy them, but it also gives you a taste of what it might be like to go ahead and take a full class. They have a lot of great stuff going on. But with that, let's get started with today's program, which is a voyage through social media, its history and influence. I'm happy to introduce Barbara A. Mudge. She began her adult life teaching high school and then segued to a 40-year career in motion picture sales and marketing. Her expertise has been called upon to instruct film students in movie distribution at both Loyola University Los Angeles and the American Film Institute. She has moderated and sat on panels at multiple international film festivals and led industry groups on copyright and IP protections. An experienced copywriter and decades-long dog rescuer, Mudge's devotion led to a recently published memoir entitled My Human and Me. So here's the thing. I started her book this morning because she had given me a copy of it, and we're going to add it into the library collection. And so all of you will be able to check it out if you want to. And after like an hour, I had to go back to my work that I was supposed to be doing at my desk because of how engrossed I was in the fascinating story. So Barbara's a really good writer. So I encourage you to check out her book as well. But one of the things that I took out of that portion that I read was she talked about, it's easy now to think about the negatives that have come with social media and the internet. And I was really struck by a portion when she talked about the benefits that had happened to her directly. So I'm very excited to hear more about that and hear more about the history of social media. So with that, please welcome to the stage with me, Barbara A. Mudge.
Thank you so much. He's so gracious. I would like to welcome you as well. We all have social media in our life these days, maybe not all, and I'm here to talk about the history and influence of social media for both those who do and those who are considering. So I'm going to ask you all a question first, if I could see a raise of hands in the dark here. Who here uses social media, has accounts? That's quite a few. So I'd say about 75%. And raise your hands again. How many of you think it's a bad thing? There, yeah, even more than use it probably think it's a bad thing. Well, and that leads me to what I want to talk about, because the reasons that social media became, one of the reasons that it became so ubiquitous in our world today is natural human impulses, the sociology of human beings that started it all. For instance, during the cavemen times, early cavemen, were driven to communicate with each other through cave drawings. Then this stems from our social nature, and it is our evolutionary history. We can't deny it. It went on to, the indigenous tribes, the more advanced civilizations communicating via smoke signals, to the boats and or ships, I should say. My dad would kill me if he heard me call that a boat. Ships and their semaphores, and kids, in school communicating via the bulletin boards. This is all part of what human beings possessing fundamental instincts to connect. So that some interesting things, the structure of social media, just a few notes here to get out of the way before we get into the program for real. Websites and corresponding mobile apps comprise social media, which allows users, the users being us individually or groups or organizations, to connect, to communicate, and to share information, and very importantly, to form relationships. Now, of course, these relationships are via these platforms, but they are relationships indeed. Some of the semantics that we deal with in social media, there's the word social media and social networking, and we use them back and forth, and let's define what each is. Media, of course, is a noun, and though that defines the online platforms that support social communities. Networking is a verb, so that's the act of sharing. So when we're talking about this, we can, get an idea in our mind whether we're talking about the thing or the act or the action. However, that being said, the term the social network has actually evolved to become a noun to describe the verb. So let's all be confused all over again. Why not? Here's some statistics. As of April of this year, there were 5.24 billion social media users around the world. Almost 64% of the world's population use social media. 94.2% of internet users also are on social media platforms. In the past year, for instance, an increase of 4.1% resulted in 206 million new users, and that is increasing as we go along. So what makes a communication platform social media? Maybe it's a little easier to talk about what social media is not. Social media is not a telephone call. It's not Zoom. It's not the Signal app, and it's not Skype. It's not the text function on your smartphone. Social media is not ChatGPT, AI, or a chatbot. It is not an email program or snail mail. It's not a search engine. It's not the private person-to-person chatting that you would do on all of those above, or some kind of one-sided blogging. So then what is it? Social networking is the gathering of people online, both those acquainted with or complete strangers to the user, in a public forum. These users have to be willing to receive both solicited and unsolicited shared information, and most of the time willing to participate in the dialogue. If you're not interested in participating in the dialogue, all you're doing is reading, then that's not really the social part of social media. You might as well be reading a newspaper, but that's okay too. It's up to you as to how you use it. On the most part, users are compliant with practices and social norms that keep things civil. And I say on the most part. There's tons of exceptions to the rule that we all hear about. This is it's structured to accommodate the user's personal preferences. More and more and more, this is how we're getting around some of the more negative things I just mentioned. And it's meant to ease the socialization for the users. How do we do it? Well, here we are. We have our cell phones, smartphones. We have our tablets. We are on social media sometimes on our desktop and our smartphone. The gamers are often on their handheld devices or on their computers playing games and talking to their buddies at the same time. This is all the devices that we communicate with each other and be social with. So our devices today are actually the result of innovations over a very long period of time, and I want to share some of that with you. The history of the mechanics. Let's start all the way back in 1609. Italian mathematician, and some of these names I'm going to skip over because I can't pronounce them. The astronomer De Monte he created what was called a mechanical multiplier to calculate fractions of a degree. Then, a few years later, a guy in Scotland, Mr. Napier, created Napier's bones, which was actually the first abacus. A couple of centuries later, the French weaver Jacquard, interesting name there because there's actually a fabric called Jacquard, developed a loom in which the pattern being woven, I bet it was Jacquard fabric, was controlled by a paper tape constructed from punch cards. We all remember the punch cards from the 50s. Also in the early 1800s, Charles Babbage, here's his picture, an English mechanical engineer, originated the concept of a programmable computer he called the differential engine, and thus he became deemed as the father of the computer. This is what it looks like. Don't ask me to explain this. I'm sure that there are dozens of books in the library here that will tell you how this worked. My dad was a mechanical engineer. He could explain it. I can't. But that's not what we're here for. The history of these mechanics continues in 1837 after establishing his reputation as a portrait painter. Bet you didn't know that. Samuel Morse contributes to the invention of this, what was called the single wire telegraph system, and in doing so invents the Morse code. There it is right there. You can see how that single wire just sort of runs through this whole machine. Then early mechanical devices, cash registers, accounting machines were all redesigned to use electric motors with gears in positions to represent the variables and make them run. I find this interesting. The word computer was actually coined as a job title, a job description for the primarily women who use these machines. More history comes along with the Scottish inventor, educator, elocutionist, and lifelong advocate of the deaf, Alexander Graham Bell, when he developed, through his studies, the acoustical telegraphy alongside his partner, Thomas Watson. On June the 2nd, 1875, the sound of a plunked reed was heard at the far end of a wire, and on March the 7th, the Patent Office issues Bell a patent on his telegraphy device. There is a page from that patent. Fast forward now through a century of telephone infrastructure to include a household DSL. Digital subscriber loop is what DSL stands for. That technology allowing for early connectivity. We all remember this thing in our homes? And the noise it made, beep, 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 beep. I can't get it out of my head. Continuing on, we now come to the Turing machine, conceived by Alan Turing in the 1930s and built during World War II England. This was a bridge between the analog computing devices that came prior and the digital age's modern computers, a version of which was employed sequential analyses, is actually what cracked the German Enigma code during World War II. This is what the machine looked like. This isn't the World War II version. This is a little bit farther on down the line. And I'll point out to you that the Turing's life story was told in the highly acclaimed feature motion picture, The Imitation Game, of 2014, starring Benedict Cumberbatch and Keira Knightley. I bring this up because as a little commercial for my class, I feature in my class each semester an extracurricular study guide of motion pictures and feature-length documentaries or series that correspond to the lessons. So obviously when we were talking about the early devices, I suggested that our students watch this film. It's very good. And speaking of films, how many of us knew that the famed Hollywood actress and amateur amateur inventor, Hedy Lamarr was actually, she and her partner, a pianist, Mr. Anthiel, developed what was called the frequency hopping spread spectrum, which she patented, and there's her patent, to divert radio signals from U-boats. And this is her device, her and her partner's device, is attributed to be a precursor to Bluetooth and Wi-Fi technologies, and which ultimately replaced those DSLs, those funny lines. We couldn't have our smartphones without Wi-Fi, one of the many things, as we'll learn. So, hats off to you. And then what happened? Well, then the internet was born. And I'm going to share with you the first part of a wonderful documentary I'll talk about later. Isn't that fascinating? Is that a final Jeopardy question, or what? Interesting. I want to give all the credit in the world to the filmmaker, copyright holder and fair use doctrine for allowing me to share this with you in this venue. This is the first part, the opening scenes from the feature documentary called Lo and Behold, Reveries of the Connected World, made by renowned Werner Herzog, whose voice you may have recognized from a TV show he was recently in. Again, first internet message sent October 29, 1969, 10:30 between UCLA and Stanford. This movie is available if you'd like to screen it on Amazon Prime Docs and on YouTube, and if you run into it as a Jeopardy question. So we came all the way from 1609 to where we are now, and which is quite a patchwork, as you can see, of today's world. The spider web, however, needed organizing. Sir Timothy John Berners-Lee is the man who did that. Working at CERN, which is the European Organization for Nuclear Research, he, in 1989, developed and implemented the components of what would eventually become the World Wide Web. HTML, that may sound familiar to you, the URL system, HTTP, these are all part of our online world, and it all came from this man's brain. His motto was, "What matters are the connections." And we can thank him for the people who went on and used these programs to develop apps and search engines and everything that we use today in our computerized world. Again, recommending a wonderful documentary film about his life. This man is still alive. He was just featured at the London Olympics. I don't know if you all remember that, and I think it was the opening ceremony. But his story is told on a documentary called foreveryone.net, 2016, available on YouTube. So it's quite well done, and I highly recommend it. So how did we put the world in our hands? Well, the wireless is absolutely needed. We can't have a cord, between us and our car going back to the house. It has to be wireless. So from 1969 and for the next 15 years, the dial-up telephone line, employing modems and routers and the computer, were used for the internet connectivity, and this was all mostly at universities. The always-on broadband ultimately replaced the dial-up, eliminating the need to connect with each usage. In 1985, the FCC released radio bans for unlicensed communication, still unlicensed at that point. And those radio waves were the lowest and longest wavelengths of the electromagnetic frequencies. I guess that's the reason why they just let them go, because nobody else wanted them. They were actually a part of, they shared, the ones that were given were shared with microwave ovens. And a portion of, just a portion of the ISM bands were assigned. Fast forward to 91, a couple of years, a scientist based in the Netherlands working for National Cash Register Company, along with American Telephone and Telegraph, invented wireless waveland for their cashier applications. And almost at the same time, Australian scientists created a localized wireless system called WLAN with applications for campus, office, and home use. So we've got basically people all over the world developing this technology. So from that came, they organized and they formed what's called the Wi-Fi Alliance, which is an international trade organization created in 1999 to establish industry standards. And that's the reason why things started to go a little more smoothly and a little faster from there on. Because of those patents that existed all over the world, somebody had to get in there and organize things. To date, there's actually no definitive claim as to who invented Wi-Fi. Instead, there are multiple entities that contributed to it, going back, yes, to our Hollywood movie star. Also in 1999, Apple offered the first Wi-Fi enabled book, the laptop marketed as the Airport. I think I had one of those back then. The name Wi-Fi, I find this interesting, does not stand for wireless fidelity. You'd think it would. But instead, the Alliance prefers the connotation of hi-fi, meaning high fidelity, and they're saying that Wi-Fi is actually a mixture of the two, wireless high quality of fidelity. Apples and oranges. So how did the first handheld device come apart? Well, an IBM engineer named Frank Canova realized that this chip and this wireless technology had become small enough to fit it actually in a handheld device. So in 94, IBM put out what was called the Simon Personal Communicator, also known as the Simon. Sort of looked like one of those bricks, if you remember those. But this was touchscreen equipped, which is very important going forward for us, because now we have to have touchscreen. And capable of faxing and emails. The first application he made was actually for the calendar function. Thereafter, the address book, appointment scheduler, calculator, world time clock, notepad, maps, stock reports, etc. were added onto it. Love the price there, $600. I think that an iPhone is a whole lot more than that these days. Now, these actually were phones. You can see at the very top there, it was phone capable, which is what made these different from those early PDAs, which were meant for productivity, but not for communication. The Simon was the step forward into the communication field. The term smartphone as two words was not coined until 1995, a year after the Simon was released. So now let's talk about the smartphone as one word. The smartphone is any mobile device with advanced computing capabilities. As I said, touchscreen interface allowing users to access a wide range of applications and services, web browsing, email, scheduling, social media apps, multimedia playback, cameras, GPS, and of course the communication methods, voice calls, text messaging, and internet messaging. All those things we are so used to, we're spoiled by having in our hip pocket. But all those wonderful things in our hip pocket have to be organized again through applications, also known as an app. These are specific to the mobile handheld phone as opposed to your desktop, which has its own set of applications, or sometimes you don't even use an app on your desktop. You may just click onto a server. The computer programs are designed very specifically for the smartphone and for very specific tasks each. It's not just the phone, it's also for tablets and it's also for your watch. So it has extended across multiple device methods, and it's intended for productivity assistance, then expanded to other smartphone functions. Many of these apps come bundled and pre-installed in our phones, and then, of course, optional apps can be downloaded from app stores at our discretion. Fun fact, in 2010, the word app was Word of the Year by the American Dialect Society. And just remember that while cell phones indeed bring us closer to the person that's far away from us, they can also take us away from the one sitting right next to us. So that's an awful lot that's going on there. Who's paying for all this anyway? I mean, this is an important aspect. I want to introduce you to the Big Five. I'm sure you've heard of every single one of these. Now, I'm concentrating on American information technology companies in this presentation. There are international ones just as vital, but these are the ones that, through the innovation that comes out of America, has really driven the most. So let's first talk about Microsoft. Microsoft is primarily personal computing, but they do a lot more than that. You'll remember in 1977, they came up with their Windows software and presented it to the marketplace, then offered the Office suite in 1990, and with many, many versions thereafter. The Xbox gaming console came out in 2001, and they bought LinkedIn in 2003. Apple is primarily a hardware company, mobile, digital entertainment, and connectivity plus. Starting in '84 with their Macintosh computers, then they segged in 2000 to iTunes. A year later, the iPod. 2007, the iPhone. Remember that great commercial? In 2008, they had the App Store. I mean, you got to sell those apps somewhere or organize them. And then the iPad came out in 2010. Meta is a social networking company first and has become equally big to their mandate, data mining. Facebook first came out in 2004. They bought WhatsApp in 2019, Instagram in 2010, and established Threads in 2023, just a couple of years ago. Amazon, primarily e-commerce, but also digital streaming, cloud storage, and a lot more. Amazon.com started in 1997, Amazon Prime, the movie company in 2005, Amazon Cloud Drive storage in 2011, Whole Foods Market they purchased in 2017, they bought Ring in 2018, and in 2023, I have an asterisk on this, they did not buy Anthropic, but they invested in Anthropic. Alphabet is, of course, Google. This is the search engine company, software, connectivity plus, and a whole lot of data mining. Google was opened in 98. About at the same time, they opened a social media company called Google+. I don't know anybody who was on that. Didn't last too long. Gmail came out in 2004. YouTube was purchased in 2005. They had the Android devices introduced in 2007. Waze was purchased in 2008. Put out Chrome in also that same year. DoubleClick, which is an ad placement company, in that same year as well. Because the other guy bought Ring, they had to buy Nest, which is also a doorbell company. And they also invested in Anthropic. Now, what is Anthropic, you ask? Well, that's that fun new thing floating around called AI. Yeah, can you imagine these big guys behind that? Oop, of course they are. So what are some of the rules and regulations throughout the world? Because the borders are crossed so much with what's happening, I mean, it is the World Wide Web after all. I do want to touch on the rules and the way things are handled outside the United States as well. But before we do, as I'm sure you have all become aware, Social networking is actually an official act these days. It started in the UK. The councils began in 2008 to engage local communities via blogs, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube usage. And of course, US saw that, followed suit in 2010 with our own usage by politicians and public officials, which allowed, some of the benefits, and it's obvious they would do this because the benefits is it allows for wider engagement with the public and opinion sharing. Social media posts made by lawmakers in their official capacity are indeed deemed official government records. Said communications are subject to retention. You have to hang on to them if they're official. There are legal and ethical considerations plus First Amendment protections, but which, this has been a bone of contention quite a bit because this is used all the time. The Supreme Court in March of 24, in fact, in the decision of Lidke versus Freed, provided guidance on when a government official's social media activity constitutes state action, emphasizing the need for and purported exercise of that official authority. And basically they said it does. So when you see a tweet, it's not a tweet anymore, it's a Truth Social now from the President of the United States, that is an official document, meaning to communicate with us because of this, the Supreme Court's decision in March of 24. So what about some current international laws? The GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, is a very restrictive EU-wide law that was implemented in 2018, regulating online privacy and personal information data via the social media apps, wherein all users have the right to access their data. What a concept. All users have the right of erasure and the right of opting out of others using their data. And all users have the right to object to processing personal information for marketing and non-service related purposes. Wow. The United Kingdom follows the same rules. Theirs has a different name, the Online Safety Act. This just happened, in fact, in July of this year. Denmark, in addition to the GDPR, passed a law, quite revolutionary, that citizens now actually own the copyright to their own faces, their own voice, and their own body. This is the new war on deepfakes has begun. So let's go outside, we'll go down south to Australia, and the Australian Consumer Law expanded obligations via their Online Safety Act pertaining to advertising. Businesses must ensure that statements on social media are true and accurate and do not make false or misleading statements. The Youth Protection Revision Act, known as the Cinderella Law, passed by South Korea's National Assembly, forbade children under the age of 16 to be online between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m., but they didn't like that, and that got overturned eventually. What a shame. Internet censorship and surveillance has been tightly implemented in China. They block social networks like Google and Gmail and YouTube and Facebook and, of course, all the others. They do have their own versions of all of those, I might add. Like China, most Arab nations also block only things that they like and criminalize posts against the national interests. However, you may have heard in the news that, the Arab Spring uprisings were largely happened because of social media outreach spurred on by the anonymous group via the dark web. So, it's around. They may not like it, but it's around. African nations also vary. Some are very, very restricted. Others are quite loose and carefree and full of Nigerian princes. For all my friends from Canada are snowbirds. I always cover Canadian law as well. Personal Information Protection and Electronics Documents Act was signed in 2000. Canada was one of the first to jump on board on all this. This sets the ground rule on how private sector organizations collect, use, and disclose personal information in the profit and commercial activities across Canada. And then just a couple of years ago, Online News Act assists Canadian news organizations to reach fair commercial agreements with the online platforms, such as search engines and social media. So they're on top of things up there. Go Blue Jays. Did I say that? Current U.S. law is the biggest one is the Telecommunications Act of 1996. First piece of legislation in the U.S. to address the internet and to promote its availability. Section 230 grants to interactive platforms the safe harbor of non-liability for any content posted on their site. Platforms are protected for any Good Samaritan blocking and screening of offensive material. However, that has all received First Amendment challenges. Then along and came in 1998 the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, where users cannot infringe on copyrighted materials by sharing on social media platforms. Social media users are the legal owners of any posts. So any of you on Facebook who see those things saying, oh, I have to post this saying that I own the photos that I put on Facebook or else Facebook's going to take ownership of them, that's bunk. That is not true. Just look at the first page of your user agreement and you'll see they don't want to own what you post. There's a reason, as we'll see in a minute. Intellectual property within social media is still a developing area of the law. This is notoriously a, quote, muddy issue. I'm quoting my copyright lawyer there. Currently, there's a moratorium on federal AI regulations, leaving legislation only to the states at this time. So here is what I was referring to earlier, Section 230, the 26 words that gets everybody into a little bit of trouble here. No provider or user of an interactive computer service, and by that, the provider or user is defined as the platforms, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, et cetera, none of those shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. That other information content provider is you, me, and every time we post. So the bottom line is the Telecommunications Act said to these guys that you platforms bear absolutely no responsibility for what is posted on your apps. That's just the law, and people talk about this all the time. If we should change this or what, because this is what's getting us into trouble. All right, let's go on to the connection evolution that has resulted because of all of this. A little bit of a timeline here. It actually is so long, I have a second page. So starting up in the corner in 1994, when the first desktops and the wired brick handhelds came out, the first social media app that was put out was called 6 Degree. That was in 1997. I'm going to use my glasses. I can't see this. And it was just, sorry about that. Oops. There we go. Much better. The first social media site was 6 Degrees in 97. So a couple of years of having these devices, and they're going, hey, we want to do something on them. Then in 2001, 6 Degrees shut down. So that didn't last long. A year later, Friendster launched. And that same year, LinkedIn launched, as well as MySpace and 4chan, which is the dark web. Then Facebook came out 2 years later, as did Words with Friends. 2006 brought us Reddit, Twitter, YouTube. 2007, MySpace becomes the most visited site in the world, and that's about the same time when the flip phone happened. Now, the flip phone was very revolutionary. A lot of people liked them, but they had those teeny little screens, and it was really hard to do social media on those. So most of this that came before those flip phones was happening on desktop computers. There were no handhelds to, be talking to people on MySpace or whatever. Okay, where are we? 2008, Facebook moves past MySpace as the most visited site in the world, and that's also the year that Pinterest opened. 2010, Instagram hit the market, as did WhatsApp. 2011 brought us Nextdoor, Snapchat, and Twitch, which is the big, huge gaming social media app. 2015 brought us Musical.ly and Discord. That's when the Friendster services were suspended. So from 2012 to 2015, they lasted a little longer than 6 degrees, and at least that's saying something. TikTok launches in full in 2017. The next year, Musical.ly shuts down, but they migrate all their users over to TikTok. So, that was a big old boost. And Google Plus, which had just been plodding around as people were using the Google search engine, never really did anything. It finally shut down in 2019. 2020, you remember, we were all stuck at home during that year. Well, that's when Clubhouse launched, because Clubhouse, along with Discord, were the two apps that were used by the teachers to communicate with their students who were stuck at home, all of their lessons. So that's very important. That's also the year that Zuckerberg, renamed his company's Meta. And a little bit of shenanigans between 2020 and 2022, and that's when Truth Social was established by Donald Trump. Elon Musk bought Twitter in 2022, same year, and renamed it X. Then in 2023, Threads was opened by the Meta Group. And here we're flip forward to 2024, brought us Blue Sky, and I'm calling that one a bit of a hybrid, which got to take my class to really get into the details of what the hybrid is. But I'd love to see you online. Anyway, it's a hybrid in that you have much better choice of who you're socializing with on the Blue Skies, as well as Substack this year. And a note about Substack, it wasn't established this year, but what happened with Substack this year is in February, it went live videos, and it can compete now with TikTok and that sort of thing. So it had been around, but it got really big as of this year. It also is a hybrid. It's a hybrid in the sense that you actually become a subscriber to the Substack group, and you don't, it's a different social group in that sense. It's not like, Facebook, etc. So what's 2026 going to bring, 2026, going to bring us? 2027, the future. What does the future of social media look like? What is it that everyone is predicting? Well, we're going to be dealing with a lot of deep fakes by nature, the beast of artificial intelligence. These applications have become widely available to the public. You can get ChatGPT or Grok or Claude or chatbots or even the most unsophisticated user can manipulate images and videos. You don't have to have some, technical company going on in order to make these things anymore. Social media has become a petri dish for these deep fake posts, memes, GIFs. And, sure, they're great to see, turn my dog into an action figure. I love seeing that. But they're more likely being used to purposely spread misinformation by people and groups with agendas. The reality behind these entries are exceedingly undiscernible by the average user. This results in what is referred to as the liar's dividend, which, because of the nature of social media, the repetition that's inherent with it, actually serves to legitimize false information. It's defined as a benefit received by those spreading false information, whereby it becomes unclear what is true and what is not true. I liken it to the digital version of The Boy Who Cried Wolf. YouTube, luckily, they're, stepping up to the plate here. They've promised no monetization for AI-generated content, and certain states have introduced legislation to regulate AI because the federal government has already declared that they're not going to do anything about it. So, they're just like, we'll deal with it later. The question is AI creating a user population that can no longer recognize or trust the truth? TikTok, we've all heard things going back and forth, whatever. There was actually legislation passed last year that mandated a sale or a ban of TikTok in the United States due to national security concerns related to its owner, ByteDance, which is a Chinese company, and the fact that the TikTok app is just filled with algorithms that gather all of our personal information. President Trump issued a delay initially in spring of 25 via executive order. He wants to placate the 170 million American users. There's a point. These people need this, and many of them do. But then more recently in September, signed another executive order to transfer the ownership to a group of investors. It hasn't been transferred yet. It's like a working group of figuring out, well, how much do they want and who's going to put up what and all this. The problem with all of that is it's not at all determined on who's going to get the algorithms, because it's not just an app. Anybody can open a video app, Substack just did, etc. It's the algorithms that are the objection. So that's the issue. It's like, keep open this space. You'll be hearing more about this relatively soon. The Kids Off Social Media Act legislation, which was meant to reverse the rewiring of next generations from phone time back to playtime, unfortunately didn't pass. It was reintroduced in this year's Congress, but since we're, not in session, I really don't know how far that's gotten. I haven't read anything. Another interesting part of our future of social media is going to be the niche communities and decentralization of networking, these hybrids that I was referring to a little earlier. Users are gravitating towards smaller, more specialized platforms such as Blue Sky and Substack, which offer greater privacy, greater control, and a personalization of the data and the sharing. Predictions are such that these could create a more fragmented social media landscape. It's like 6 of one, a half dozen of the other as to which is worse. So let's review a little bit. What are these influences that we've been talking about that lead to the social media landscape of today? Well, first, that human sociology. We have a basic instinct to connect with each other. The ingenuity that happened throughout the centuries, the financial support of technology, worldwide legislation that regulates things, and then there's always you and me, the users. So I'd like to invite you once again, if you enjoyed this talk, to join me on Fridays starting on November the 7th from 9:30 to 11:30 via Zoom. My class is only on Zoom for 6 weeks from the comfort of your home. And information is on the table in the back on how to sign up. And our enrollment period ends very soon, so I suggest you get on that quickly. Of course, I would be remiss in not asking you to follow Learning in Retirement Palm Desert on Facebook. Like and follow us, please, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you very much. There. Oh. I don't know if you raise the lights, if there are any questions? Any questions? Yes.
Well, I saw this, and I'm not really sure where it was, but as far as Alan Turing is concerned, way back there, he was a gay gentleman, and they didn't approve him,
Right.
and so he committed suicide
Yeah.
by eating a poisoned apple with one bite. And so when you see your laptop, when you see your laptop open or whatever, you got that apple with one bite in it, it might have been from Alan Turing.
I hadn't heard that. That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. I've got to look that up. Thank you so much for sharing that. Is that the apple, because Alan Turing had committed suicide, he committed suicide with a poisoned apple. There's a special kind of poison. I remember that. I think that's in the movie. But he took one bite of it and passed. And that the Apple logo with the bite out of it is in honor of Turing, who basically started it all. So thank you so much. There was someone else with their hand up? No. Well, again, I thank you all for coming. It was a pleasure to have you here.